Wilbur, O&B Director.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
John Weddleton.
Bill Evans.
Eric Croft.
Amy DeBoski.
Forrest Dunbar.
Elby Bridges.
Tim Steele.
Dick Training.
Sharon Houston. Rose Foley, Assembly Bethany. And I'd just like to thank everybody for being here, but especially my colleagues, because this is a community of the whole, and Patrick Swingle said he wouldn't be able to make it. With that said,
Start calling.
no, with that said, you have the floor, Mr. What you do?
I'm gonna go with Mr. Harris.
Whoever wants to start first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just, Robert Harris, so just very briefly, the financials of the city and the municipality are in good shape, and with that, I'll turn it over to Dan for kind of a brief update on revenues.
Okay, so for revenues, we're gonna be meeting with the mayor's exec group this afternoon to go over all the details of the report. And then, the highlights of that report will go to the assembly, within a 2 or 3 week timeframe, and hopefully next week. The revenues, the picture for the municipality, this is for general government, as of September 14th, which is yesterday. It's about $3.4 million negative net revenue variance, which is 0.5% when you compare it to the budget. That is virtually the same as what we quoted before. There have been some movements in different areas over the last month or two, but they have not netted to any major change. A couple highlights are the room tax is actually down a little bit from what was budgeted. Through the second quarter, we received information from the hotels which showed there was a slight decline in the room tax. That's primarily driven by more competitive pricing. There's a lot more mid-level hotels out there, and it's been driving the price down overall. Tobacco tax is expected to be right on budget. We actually had a spike in the most recent month, but we never rely on spikes to project the rest of the year. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but it looks pretty strong that tobacco tax will meet budget. Auto registration tax is coming down a bit, several $100,000 off. That is really probably a response to the PFD going down. So when PFD is cut in half, people may not be as confident in major purchases, that type of thing. They may defer purchasing new vehicles. New vehicles have the highest auto registration tax. So, so that we're thinking that that's a primary contributor to that. Marijuana tax, it is a delayed start for marijuana retail. We have shaved off our estimate. The original budget was $700,000. We now think we may get $400,000, and that is if they open in late October, early November. I heard on the radio this morning, Cindy Franklin saying retail won't be open until February of next year. So we'll just keep monitoring that. But we did estimate conservatively in the beginning, and we're shaving it down. Next year will be virtually a full year of retail marijuana sales, and there's a range of revenue there, and the budget office is considering where to budget for 2017. But next year will be a very different story because we'll actually have pretty much a full year of retail marijuana. Those are the highlights in terms of major taxes. Other revenues are pretty similar. The Building Development Services Fund 181 is still down for the year due to decreased activity. It's down about $900,000. That's its own separate fund. Investment earnings is actually positive this year. It's about it's almost $2 million. It's a little bit less than $2 million positive variance there. And then for other departments, various fines, the biggest area that's been hit negatively was police department, and that is by far driven by the PFD reduction. A big portion of their revenues on delinquent fines for both criminal fines and traffic fines come from PFD, and with half of the amount to garnish, it hurts us. I think it's $1.8 million of a revenue hit. That's what we projected. So,
Dan's question on marijuana again. There is an application fee to the state. Has the state started taking any of that over to us?
I haven't seen any of that come yet, no. But we are aware of it. The clerk's office is actually, I think Rose has actually been quite helpful there. They are anticipating it, but we haven't actually seen it posted. That we're aware of. So.
Ms. Gray Jackson, I sent a letter over to the state marijuana control board asking where's the money?
Yeah.
Because the way the law is written, it's supposed to be 100% immediately, and I understand what immediately means.
Okay.
I hope the state does.
Okay, well, we'll keep on top of that.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee, Mr. Crowe.
Why are we seeing that dramatic a reduction before the halved PFDs is already hit? Do we do a pre-garnishment where we set up to take?
Well, this is a projection, so we know the history and we know approximately what our realization rate is and kind of what the sensitivity is when they cut PFD. It's not 1-to-1, it's about 0.8 is what the factor is that we use. But based on our history of past submissions and realizations, that's our best estimate, and it's probably gonna be right in that area, so.
I'm sorry, just follow up real quick. So when you were talking about a lot of historical for the rental car tax and the bed tax. So this is based on what we see, we're changing our projections, and you're changing your PFD projections as well.
Right, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Crowe. Mr. Trainee?
Then we're not first to land on garnishments, are we?
No, we're about number 6 or 7, so child support, IRS.
So even if they've got the higher one, we're still low on the pecking order. We're there, but cutting down initially on the amount, it's gonna filter down, we're not gonna get that much.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Dan, you said the room taxes were down. I didn't, rental tax for cars, is that, I thought that was up.
Yeah, you're correct. Room tax itself is down, and it's down, I wanna say maybe 2 or 3%, something like that. Rental vehicle is actually up about 9%. So rental vehicle is really fairly small in the scheme of things, it's $5 or $6 million total. Room tax is like, 22, 24 million, somewhere in that range. So, rental car, they're kind of two different stories. Room tax is down because of the competitive, mid-market, pricing. That's really had an effect. With rental cars, it's actually, the average price has been going up. So, so that is what's driving, no pun intended, what's driving that, is best we can tell. The same number of agencies are effectively out there, and we know tourism numbers are not necessarily a big change, but it's all in the pricing, and that's what's driving it on both sides. They're just they're both related to tourism, but the ability to increase price is there for rental vehicles, and really it's more competitive in hotels. So.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
Could I follow up for a second?
Certainly.
Thank you. Did we ever start getting any money from the B&B?
For Airbnb, we did, the Assembly approved the ordinance, we did get them registered officially within 3 weeks' time. So effective on August 1st, they began to collect from all their customers. And we will not see their first filing until October 30th. But then we'll kind of know, and that's going to be a big, they're not going to get all of the third quarter, but it'll be a decent sign in terms of, for the strongest quarter there is, we'll have basically August and September, 2/3 of a quarter to look at. So it'll be interesting to see what it comes to be.
Great, thank you.
For asking that question, you caught my energy, because that's what I was going to ask, so thank you very much. Please continue.
And that is about it. I mean, in terms of revenues, we're getting into the part of the year where we don't expect a lot of major change. I think investments certainly can change month to month quite a bit, but a lot of these others they're really settling in. So we'll continue to work with the Mayor's Exec Group, update them, and then share those reports with the Assembly each month. But this is a pretty solid sign. The good thing in this too is it helps inform OMB so they know where we stand with this year's fund balance, perhaps. I mean, just some rough estimate there, and then what we should try to plan for in 2017. So hopefully this being on top of it like this is a good piece of information for managing the budget this year and next year.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Weddleton?
You said are you gonna go into the cost side next, or?
Lance is.
Oh, you will, okay, maybe, I'll wait, but, and I just have a vague understanding, if I'm totally wrong, correct me. So my understanding is when the school district loses some of their base funds from the state, then we can't give, or the amount we're allowed to give drops. Is that right?
I actually don't know about that
Okay.
directly, so I don't know if Lance.
Well, anyway, how much is that, and is that factored in? base student allocation drops and we can only give X percent.
Right.
And that drops, so we can't contribute as much as we expected, so now we have money to
And I
spend.
don't know if that's a local restriction or state restriction.
Through the chair, I actually don't think that's correct. I believe, at least according to Mike Abbott, he has told me several times that it will not affect our ability to give to our current local cap.
But the local.
But I can have Mike Abbott, well, yes, I can have Mike Abbott follow up with John.
Maybe
He's-
roll it
he's-
up.
There's a calculation to determine the basic need and the maximum local contribution as a percentage of basic need, and that's not impacted by what the state contributes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Training?
Just we might ask legal to give us a complete definition. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Please continue. Whoever's next.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I think I'll maybe jump in here. Reported yesterday to the Budget Advisory Commission, the citizens group, about July reports, but I have August. This report will show up at your, at your next Tuesday night meeting. So at the end of August, we were 66.7% through the year. And we were about a little over 60% total spent. Our labor is pretty much right on the mark, a little bit over, and then our non-labor is a little bit under. A lot of that has to do with seasonalities. We have a couple departments that, as I mentioned before, just due to the seasonality, they're running a little bit hot. We'll summarize that when we run that to your report in at the end of the month. But overall, we're staying within our budget. We've asked the departments to be mindful of this year and look to save 0.5%. So they're doing their best to manage that as well. So that will, as Dan mentioned, in addition to some of these revenues, the savings that we can take advantage of this year, they may be able to help us next year as we prepare our budget. So departments are doing a very good job overall. And as it relates to the budget itself, as many of you are aware, we'll be submitting, our target is to submit the budget to you 2 weeks from Friday, on September 30th. We'll be introducing it on the first meeting in October. Your first public hearing is the 25th of October. Your first work session is the 21st of October. And then we'll have a work session thereafter. And then your second public hearing will be November 1st. And then we'll ask for your actions in the middle of November, on November 15th. I know that the Assembly, after this second public hearing, you guys will, if you haven't seen it, I think last Tuesday night you saw a revised calendar for the budget. So I think right now we're working with the administration on the challenges for the changes in the revenues and all of the other things that we have to do. Working on the mayor's initiatives to improve public safety and how we keep that supported. So we're putting together a proposal for him, and that's where we are right now. OMB is very busy trying to manage that for us.
Mr. Training?
Lance, yesterday you said that you've got a couple departments you're concerned about, they're running hot. Which departments?
So I think the one that they're mostly in public works. It's just a seasonal thing. It's just a construction season and maintenance issues. I'm not necessarily concerned. They're over the percentage right now. Some of them are running high, but I know that as the season comes out, they'll cool off, and then we have some of the non-labor has not been expended. But I know those things are going to come in as we get towards the end of the year.
Let's make sure we let that citizen advisory board know about that when it gets down.
Yep.
Because there's some on there that really get excited to hear things like that.
Absolutely.
The other thing would be overtime. How are we doing on overtime? For the fire department, last couple of years, we had some really.
I don't know off the top of my head about fire department's overtime. I know that myself and Mike Abbott have been challenging the fire department on their overtime, so right now I like my chances.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Keep an
Mr.
eye on
Training.
it.
Mr. Dunbar?
Sorry, thanks, Lance. So I'm just asking this because it's my first budget cycle, so I'm trying to learn how things kind of work. You said we were 66.7% through the year and only 60% spent. That's actually a pretty large difference. So I'm wondering where does the cost kind of spike? What month do we expect those things to come in line?
We're just getting out of the spike.
We're getting out of the spike.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm not understanding what you said though. You were saying 66.7% through the year, as in through the calendar year.
Through the budget year, yeah.
through the budget year,
Yeah.
but we've only spent 60%. That actually seems like we're doing really, really well.
I'm sorry, that was on the
Was that
64%, my mistake, 64%.
still pretty good? And if we're already through the spike, so are we not anticipating, is there an end of year spike as well where things?
Well, I
start to
think we'll
line?
also see some, I think we'll see some increase we're down in our non-labor expenditures. I do think that those non-labor expenditures will come in, and that's where we'll see that gap being closed. The labor part, I think we're like less than 0.5% off where we should project to be.
Is that typical, like, almost every year, do we hit, are there some non-labor expenditures that come at the end?
Yes, and some of it has to do with grants, the timing of grants, when we get them encumbered and spent.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Littleton?
You said that 900,000 drop in public works or coming in, so but some of that is, does that decrease the costs over there?
No.
Do you have less rezones coming in, so you have
But
less
it does-
time?
No, we set the expenditure rate, it's just whether or not those expenditures are supported by revenues coming in or property taxes, and so, if the revenues don't come in, the personnel don't automatically leave, so that's part of the adjustments we do for the next calendar budget. If those revenues are gonna continue to be modified, do we continue to support that same amount of service if the service is supposed to be, supported by those revenues?
You know, my understanding is that there's some people under contract to do some of the work there, review, I don't even know what, look at, do surveying or whatever for the city. So
Right.
if these projects aren't coming in, then they're not paid. So there should be some reduction in costs if there's not as many projects.
That's true, right, so there's, yes, there will be. I
So
mean,
there are
there's
some,
less
right, so-
invoices, so there's less services, less invoices, less cost, but, right now, we project the amount of 181 funds that are coming in, then we have some expenses, labor, non-labor being contract, so if we're not doing the work, then, for contract services, then we're not getting the invoices, we're not being paid, so, but, right now, we can see the building, the development services, particularly as it relates to, construction, we're seeing a lot of remodels, the amount of work might be the same, but the amount of revenue's not.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Littleton. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Lance, you said that you've asked the departments to try to find another 0.5% to save, and I'm wondering, how are they expected to do that? Are they gonna be not filling open positions? Is that one way
They
to
can
do
manage,
that? or-
they can manage it however, whatever they want. My initial directive to them was, you gotta stay within your budget. There will be no over costs, you gotta stay there. So if they have opportunities to save monies, I wanna know what they are. Whatever it might be, fuel, might be whatever it is, so, yeah, I'm asking them to do what they can to help us out as we look forward.
And then, if they're able to find ways to save a little bit on this year's, does that mean we're gonna end up cutting their budget a little bit next year?
Mr. Peterson, I'm trying to figure out how all we're gonna manage that. We have a lot of priorities, and then the revenues are going down, as Dan mentioned, and it's gonna be difficult.
All right, just thought I'd throw it out there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Peterson. Ms. Nadrowski?
Thank you. So Lance, now that we're seeing, as of right now, September, we're seeing a negative variance of about $3.5 million. You still feel like you can manage that within the budgets?
That's the challenge, yeah.
Because my question is, where's the money coming from? If it's not, if you can't manage it within the budget, where do you anticipate to be drawn from?
So the loss of revenues, as Dan mentioned, that 3.5, we have one or two options in a large scale. One is ask those departments to start reducing their spending because those revenues are not coming in. And if they can continue to do that, and if we can't do that, then, do we use fund balance? That's a decision between the mayor and the assembly. But right now, I'm looking, since we know those revenues are down, I'm asking them to keep their expenditures down, and all across the board. And so that would be the ideal location that we end up, and that's what I'm.
So you're still hopeful you can do it within the budget?
Thank you, Mr. Nadrowski. Mr. Littleton?
So your choices are cut spending and then you can make it up, or fund balance. Did you say that's, the assembly has to agree to tap into our
If we want to
savings?
make up those loss in revenues and continue the expenses, we gotta cover those costs
Right.
any other way. And any expenditure of fund balance requires assembly approval. You'll have
Okay.
2 of them in a couple weeks.
So if we said no, then what happens?
Then the remaining of the
Sorry?
month, we'll have to figure out how we get those departments to meet their budget.
In 3 months, you'd have to, at least, thanks.
That's why we do this monthly, to keep you guys abreast as fast as possible. So if we see a department or a particular situation, we have the ability to react. And the projections that Dan mentioned are equally important.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Just, one quick comment, for clarity. The assembly appropriates all funds, so if the department goes over budget by code, you have to report it to the assembly, and then we have to make a decision, the assembly does, have to make a decision where to get the money from. Usually it would be fund balance, it would be an appropriation, depending on the amount, it'd be a public hearing, so there's a process that occurs if departments go over budget. Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I should know the answer to this, I think, but at the end of the first quarter budget revisions, we had this surplus of Mr. Weddleton, Mr. Dunbar had the proposal to, in the last quarter of the year, take that money and if it was still there, give to tax relief. In the interim, is that money part of fund balance now? Is that just where it's sitting?
It's still in fund balance,
Okay.
yes.
And so, and how much do we know how much that ended up actually being?
At the end of first quarter, it was $15 million total of fund balance. The amount on the action was $5 million.
Okay.
So, that is where we are right now.
And since we passed an amendment technically at that point, saying to actually spend that money on tax relief, if the money was still there in the fourth quarter, what is the status of that now? Are we automatically going to do that, or are you gonna bring that back to us for a?
Bring it back, because I believe I think the amendment was to bring it back to the assembly after September 1st for consideration on what you want to do with it. You know, as we are building the budget, and we find out what our revenues are, is that fund balance, is that still, you know, something that we're gonna do? If it's not, that's a recommendation from the assembly, from the mayor, that's a decision from you guys. So right now, you know, we have that $15 million that for fund balance. How much of that we would use for one-time services next year? We're still working on that one. Thanks. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Steele?
Yeah, I'm glad to see that on the revenue side that you're recognizing the price difference or the cost difference or the revenue difference between the high-end hotels and the less expensive hotels. We are building another rather large, I suspect mid-range hotel on C Street. And I don't know when the completion date of that is, but you were right, I think, to assume you're not going to get the taxes that we've been getting with the leaks that we have. And so hopefully that'll be accounted for, at least tractors or extent. That'll probably be over by the first of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Please continue.
Anything else?
I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I'm complete, I'm done with my.
Please
done.
continue.
Thank you, I'm done, thank you.
No.
Unless you have further questions.
Well,
Mr. Training has a question.
How was Fund 601 doing?
601 is
Remember
fleet.
601, it was our building fund, it was way down at one time, then it got back up healthy again.
I think 601 is fleet, but I'll check. I don't know.
181 is the one.
181.
181.
Used to be called 601 years ago.
So the fund is down. I mean, the amount of revenue that we were expecting in to be contributing to that service is down, as Dan mentioned. The balance in the 181 in their fund, I don't know right off the top of my head. I'll find out.
Just let me know, I want to know if it's negative or positive, where we're at on it.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. I think Mr. Trainee is referring to a
Development Services, is that what
Yeah.
it's particularly related to? That's in 181 fund.
It was down and they got back up again, I just want to know where it's at now.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Peterson and then Mr. Bosky.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I don't know if there's an answer for this question. We're looking at somewhat uncertain economic times in the future, and has that started to have an effect on real estate prices? Does anyone have any numbers on that? I know from the appraisal department, or I don't know who exactly would have that, but just wondering.
Madam Chair, Mr. Peterson, so the assessor's office has been reporting that things look like they've been holding fairly steady through the community, but I will ask that if there's additional information. Typically, we would not actually get into that process of trying to estimate things until the beginning of the year when we go out and we start that entire process again. I think there are some certain groups within the community that have been looking at real estate prices and so forth, but I'm not following. I'm following that. So I'll ask the assessor.
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you,
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Peterson.
Just to answer that question, the numbers that I heard yesterday from AEDC is that the average home sale price in August was $367K, so up from an average of $350. And August had record home sales. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's still stagnated at the top end, you know, the 650 plus
Right.
homes, but things are definitely moving and the average home sale price is up.
Good.
Thank you,
That's good
Mr.
news.
Green. Mr. Peterson, do you have anything else?
I'm done, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Bosky.
Thank you. Lance, I wanted to ask you about the Chuquet Volunteer Fire Department. So they increased their mill from 0.98 last year to 1, but they're telling me that the municipalities are reporting to them that their revenue is actually going to be down from what it was last year. Can you, and it doesn't have to be right now.
Right.
But can you and I either get together or break it down for me just so I can see the numbers, so I can accurately talk with the board of supervisors? Because I know there's 2 at the community council meeting last night that were very concerned.
Yeah.
They're wanting to know how specifically municipalities calculating it and the details.
Okay, we'd be glad to help you with that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Trainee.
Little discussions on the amount of money being cut back from the state. I heard rumors of revenue enhancements being looked at by the administration. Are you putting that into your budget for us to consider, or are you gonna look at that area to increase the amount of money coming in for revenue enhancements?
Yeah, we are looking at what opportunities we might have for other places of revenue enhancements, investments, you know, wherever those things might be. So, yeah.
That'll be factored in your budget you present to us.
Yes, with all of the assumptions and where there would be in the amounts. Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Please continue. If there's anything else. Mr. Whittle.
So, there's no shortage of demand for more police on the street in every trail and every corner. So if we
I heard
have, and one assigned to every camp. So if, say, we have the academies coming through, so what's the additional cost for, say, 50 new recruits? They get through the academy and now we have 50 new officers out there.
So,
Just roughly.
The academies are running about between 1.25 and 1.5 million to run an academy, and then once they get on, you know, the academies in part there to deal with attrition. So the attrition are positions that are already budgeted. So any new officers above the attrition, those would be additional costs that we would have to include into the budget.
So what do you think 50 new officers is?
About 50 each. Yeah. Yeah.
Fully loaded, $150 each.
Roughly.
Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Mr. Bosky.
I have one more question. As we do our budgeting, and, you know, this is just something that, you know, recently, I don't know why it's taking me a little bit to think of it, but as we're budgeting for attrition, depending, it doesn't matter what department we're in, the new people that we're bringing in to replace the older, more senior people, obviously probably are cheaper, I would assume. Why don't we actually reduce those department budgets when, you know, for a position or
Mr. Belsky, we do.
Okay.
We do. I mean, we get a.
I never seen the budgets actually go down.
You know, so if we have an OMB director and they've been here for forever, and then a new OMB director comes in and they're new, the previous OMB director may be paid at X, and this one's at X1 at -1. When that department submits their budget is recommendation at X -1. And so.
So you do automatically scale it down?
We get we get recommendations from departments, hey, we have this senior planner, they're gone, they're not gonna, and we're gonna fill them next year. And instead of putting them at a 16, we're gonna fill them at a 14, we budget them at a 14, we don't automatically fill them at their existing. So we do get that information from them, and as much as we can accommodate that, we do.
So even like with an APP and stuff, if we lose 10 officers, senior officers, I mean, obviously they're trying to grow the force now, so they'll probably keep it, but I assume those differences would be for your positions?
Well, there will be all across the board, because if you have sergeants with 30 years, they're leaving, and then someone else is probably gonna go into that, they're gonna get an advancement, and then someone's gonna move in, and so the recruitments come in, so we take all of those adjustments into account.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Evans?
No, I was just gonna echo what Lance was saying, it's more like a river, so that you're putting people in the beginning end and losing some at the end, but the people in the middle are moving up too, so it tends to wash out.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Wellington?
So, just a couple months ago, we redid the pay for the non-representative police and fire,
Mhm.
and it was like $150,000, like, holy smokes, a lot of money. And they said they could get that within their current budget, it looks
Right.
like they are, pretty much. So, but for next year, do you,
Those are-
what kind of adjustment would you have to
So
account for
those,
that?
those adjustments are considered to continue, they make the increased cost of 2016 there to consume within their budget. Those are now considered a continuation cost. So when we do the rollover of the personnel, if you were at, $50,000 and you went to $60,000 as that change, we automatically roll you to $60,000, and that's where we start.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wellington. Mr. Steele?
Yeah, and I'm not sure who wants to tackle it here, but the costs of all the violence and the meetings and the park cleanups and police overtime perhaps, and that type of stuff, are there adjustments going on, and do we have the funding to be able to keep that up through the end of the year?
So it's a combination of both. Sometimes it is a continuation, sometimes it's a request based on that, and then we ask, do we expect those things to continue? We've asked the fire department, we had a big spike in spice calls. Are the spice calls going up, or are the calls going up? Help us understand what that is. And so, as it relates to the challenges that APD and the community is facing right now, Chief Tolley he's got a difficult task in front of him right now with the budget that he's got. So, if he wants to do something different, he's gonna present something to us, and he has.
Anybody thinking about opening up one of those slush funds or?
I don't know what those are, so if you find one, you let me know what they are.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Evans?
Good answer.
Thanks. At the assembly meeting the other night, and we had a presentation from one of the communities, and they were talking about, obviously their frustration with the crime problem. But they indicated at the time that, they were willing to pay more to get better security in their area. I was wondering if there are, as part of the budget process or anywhere else that you're aware of, contemplation going on about perhaps mechanisms like that, where you have almost area assessments that people voluntarily choose to participate in for safety. I don't know if that's part of the discussion or not.
I'm not aware of it, but it might be something not unlike the downtown business district. They assess
Right.
themselves differently for different types of service. Might not be necessarily police, but they elect to do that themselves. So, Mr. Evans, I'm not aware of it in the mix, but that's a good idea.
That, through the chair, that is something that Airport Heights has brought up. Mountain View is doing it actually through ADP. They've done an assessment and they're essentially outsourcing to the ADP ambassador program just to do cleanup in Mountain View right now, not to do any sort of security patrols. But I know those two communities in particular are looking to see if they can do their own self-assessment. And certainly many years ago, Midtown had that discussion and never went through with it. Probably Mr. Cheney remembers that.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so, I probably should know this, but does the Muni pay for that ambassador program downtown, or is that the Chamber of Commerce, or
The business
It does.
downtown.
business owners? Okay, Yeah, because that has come up at a couple community council meetings lately, that they think the ambassador or something similar to that for other neighborhoods around town might be something they might be interested in looking at.
It's called the Business Improvement District. Thank you, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Tranny.
Everybody wants it until the bills come due, believe me. Over the years, relative to this special assessment district, we held hearing after hearing, everybody saying, I want to be exempt from paying it. And so we've had to deal with it. Finally, when we got Hickle, Captain Cook online, it's not going to be viable now, but believe me, every little homeowner doesn't like paying for it.
Thank you, Mr. Tranny. Mr. Bover?
So this is gonna be our last meeting before we submit our budget, Madam Chair. So if you or many of your colleagues, if you would please let me know if there's something particular you're gonna be looking for in the budget presentation, if you could let me know so I could make that accommodation. Basically, the process that we're gonna go through is we're gonna start with a short overview, then we're gonna go straight into general government operating, then we're gonna go into the capital, and then we'll continue the capital at your second one, and then do the utilities at your second one, and then we'll be done. That's the general thought process. If you want to do it differently, let me know so I can work with Rose and we can get it that way. But if there's one or two particular items that you think that we might not be thinking of, please let me know, and then I can do that ahead of time.
Thank you, Mr. Bover. Well, we have a little bit of time right now. If anybody has any ideas or suggestions, Mr. Rhodes?
A lot of times you talk about funds and fund numbers, and I don't know all the fund numbers. And I haven't seen flipping through the budget that there's like, oh, here's a page that has, this is what Fund 181 is and stuff like that.
We can give you a key.
Just, yeah, that would be helpful.
No problem.
I may try to look them up and figure it out.
Well, if no one has any ideas now, just submit them